Oh, howdy all. Grab yourself a beer. It's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to talk about an upcoming private league that I'm going to be joining in. So this is Anomaly the Forgotten. It's an initiative of a couple of streamers, Lolcohol and a Wild Aussie. Link to in the description of the video below to their profiles. And what it's going to be is an opportunity to play Path of Exile with a number of restrictions in place that should just make the game a little bit different and quite interesting, I think. So there's three fundamental restrictions. One applies to character builds, one applies to item drops, and one applies to vendors. So the first one, and probably the most impactful of the three restrictions, is that vendors will not exist. There'll be no option to sell or buy at vendors. This means that you can still use the various, you can still use things like Tujen's haggling, because that's not a vending screen. But you will not be able to sell a 6-socketed item for 7 Jeweler's Orbs. You will not be able to turn 4 Jeweler's Orbs into 1 Orb of Fusing from Lani. You will not be able to trade for coral rings early in the game. You will not be able to upgrade flasks and things like that. This has a significant impact on an item acquisition and also on the relative rarity of a number of items. It'd be really interesting to see, because we're going to have the ability to trade items, it's going to be a really interesting dynamic where, for instance, looting a 16 quality gem on the ground is going to matter a lot more because people can't just level a gem to 20, then do the GCP flip. So this is going to be pretty transformative to the game, and I think it's going to lower the power of the most experienced players, and particularly slow down the most experienced players in the game. And that's because the most experienced players in the game generally have a lot of knowledge of vendor SPs that are not very well known. Lastly, this will outright exclude a couple of items from the league. So for instance, there will be no Precursors emblems except maybe ones from the Remembrance Divination card, because that item is only acquired through a vendor SP. And there's a few other items like that. I think that there's one of the items from the original Elder is only from a vendor SP. There'll be no Dusk Dawns, things like that. But that's a minor thing. The main thing is going to be the reduced access to Jeweler's Orbs and the reduced access to Fusing Orbs that this implies, and also the increased utility of Gem Cutter Prisms. The second thing that modifies how items work is that no magic or rare items drop. So I have played private leagues with this mod before, and they are a lot of fun. One of the things that makes them so fun is that you end up in a situation where you don't want to hoard your currency. You want to actually use it to improve your character in the here and now. However, unlike the other game modes that really incentivize using your currency now rather than hoarding it, and here I'm thinking of solo, self-found, and hardcore, it's quite a different environment when you can team up with other players still, you can trade with other players still, and you don't have the punishing deaths of hardcore. But at the same time, you do need to improve your gear yourself usually in order to progress. So this tends to be a really interesting setting, and it does, however, have a few side effects. It sort of breaks a couple of types of items, and you should expect that you'll have almost no access to veiled crafts in this event. So if you do play this Anomaly League and you do push into endgame, you should expect that you'll get almost no veiled items. The only way that you can get veiled items, in my experience from this, is either from the... you can get them from ritual loot, apparently, although I haven't verified that personally. You can get them from bargains with syndicate members, and you can get them by using a veiled Chaos Orb on an existing item. But that's going to mean that they're much, much, much rarer than usual. When you do get a veiled item, you should see it as a bit of a jackpot drop, and maybe trade it to someone that is trying to unveil all the crafts that will be on a lot. That might be the way to go with that. The last thing, though, is that, and this is probably the most decisive thing about Anomaly, is that there are significant restrictions on the allowable classes. So, at the moment, for each of the 6 core classes that are not the Scion, there is a least popular ascendancy. Only these ascendancies can be played. So, you may play as an Inquisitor, you may play as an Elementalist, a Trickster, a Chieftain, a Pathfinder, or a Champion. That is it. There are to be no Scions, no Ascendants. There are to be no Juggernauts, there are to be no Gladiators, there are to be no Raiders. So this is going to create a situation where there's just a lot more, there's a forced build diversity of a sorts, where you can't play the most popular builds in the existing trade league, so you're forced to play something else. I do think that there are good choices for all of these ascendancies. So some of the things that I would consider playing in this, if you're looking to play as a duelist, Champion can work with pretty much anything except spellcasters. Champions are the best support characters that are allowed under this rule set, and actually they're not that much worse than Guardians, to be honest. They are worse than Guardians, and that's why you don't see champion supports very much in the existing trade league. But they're not much worse. They're fine. Then you have in the Chieftain, Elementalist, and Trickster. All of those builds can play Ignite Fireball. Now, Ignite's in a bad place at the moment, and so you are going to have a number of difficulties doing any sort of bosses on those characters, but you will still have reasonable damage when it comes to trash clear, and just by its very nature, Fireball is incredible at clearing. So the Ignite versions anyway. You proliferate Ignite chains that can wipe out entire screens. And so I think that that's a very viable option, although don't do it if you're wanting to do your own Conquerors at endgame. You'll probably need to get help with 3 and 4 Watchstone Conquerors. Additionally, the Trickster is really good with in conjunction with the Essence Drain Contagion setup, and that is actually somewhat of almost a meta build. The Inquisitor has a number of shenanigans available if you can get your hands on the unique weapon Mjolnir. Mjolnir is not easy to source. It's a pretty rare item, so for that reason, I'd probably stay away from it. There are other options for Inquisitor. I mean, it is just a generally okay generalist spellcaster ascendancy, and so it can certainly be played, and it's fine. Chieftain also has other options. I've already mentioned the option of playing as an Ignite Fireball character, but if you don't want to go down that route, you can use something silly like Earthshatter Totems, a link to Consecrated Path, or you can use something a bit more serious like a traditional totem build. There's a lot of genuinely good totem builds, and they do, that is attack totem builds, and they do tend to be chieftains, so that's really solid. For the Pathfinder, this is where I'm sort of leaning towards going at the moment, because I sort of want a new raider over in Expedition, and if I'm going to level one, I may as well do it through this. If you do go with a Pathfinder here, one of the things that I would probably look into is the poison synergies that the Pathfinder Ascendancy has. They're pretty strong. Pathfinder is probably the second best poison ascendancy behind the Assassin, maybe third best behind a Cultist and Assassin. It's got a number of synergies with it, and so that is an option there. So that gives something that you can play on every base class, except for the Scion. The Scion is just outright banned because the Ascendant is too similar to other Ascendancies, essentially. So that is the Anomaly. I am definitely looking forward to this and think it should be a lot of fun. If you're interested in joining, I will put links to how you can do that. I'll put a link to Lolcohol and Wild Aussie's threads on Reddit, and you can just have a look at that. Make sure that you're happy with everything that is in the league, and if it sounds like it'll be fun, then definitely sign up and I will see you there. You can also join Lolcohol's Discord, which will be linked to, and there's a sort of chat community that's set up there, or they'll be setting up an in-game chat channel. I think they're going for 2426, but I will correct that if it's wrong. Anyways, that's all I got. May your Valors have interesting results, and I will see you in the Anomaly The Forgotten. And who knows, maybe I'll try to be the first person to complete Maven's Invitation The Forgotten in Anomaly The Forgotten.